So we'll start again from Kuf Tez Vav, continue to the end of the Shir, Bezrat Hashem, and we will continue into the next year. I don't know if we'll do the whole of the next year, long, but we will start. We'll start continuing it. You say it. So we'll start on page Kuf Tez Vav again. We started it, but we'll do it again. Torah shel smichut dat al Kodesh Baruch Hu. The important point to emphasize that we're talking about smichut dat. It's a Torah which demands reliance, relying on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, being samech that He'll take care of us and that He will bring us to our appointed times. Okay, everybody, we're starting on again. We're just getting underway. So we're on page Kuf Tez Vav. Kuf Tez Vav. Okay. So Torah shel smichus das shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Torah that we've been discussing, the Torah in the psukim in Daniel, at the end of Daniel. So there's a Torah which requires that we rely on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we'll see what that means. So, and this is, we did this already, we'll do it again quickly. HaKetz chayav liot satum. The Ketz has to be unclear. Excuse me. ונמצא מבואר שעצם הקץ חייב להיות מפורש בתורה מבחינת קץ שם לחושך. On the one hand, it has to be there because the ketz, as we said, is built into the way God created the world. God created the world with that the golus should have a ketz. It's impossible that there should be a golus without a ketz. We'll see maybe in the next year we'll learn a piece of morale who explains it a little bit more clearly. But the ketz sam lachoshech, whatever darkness there is in the creation, right, always has to come to an end. Whereas the Kodesh Baruch Hu created the world for the purposes of light and illumination, for the purposes of bringing everybody to bringing the world to its positive conclusion. Right? Kodesh Baruch Hu didn't create a world which will, chas v'sholom, end up in destruction, end up in a place where He didn't want it to be. Right? He created Kodesh Baruch Hu had a picture of what He wanted, that ideal, how He wants the ideal world to look. And He built into the world that there's going to be, whatever choshech is going to appear, there's going to be a ketz sam lachoshech. And that also, Moshe explained when we learned in Rei Amuna, right? The whole idea of Tchias HaMesim is also that similar idea. Because Baruch Hu created human beings to reach an ultimate goal. Right? He didn't create human beings to die. Right? He created human beings to live. The only thing is that because of the chet, so we have to go through a process which includes death in order to get to there has to be a choshech of death in order for us to get to the life. But so just like the death of the grave is chet sam lachoshech, there's going to be an end to that, and there's going to be tchiyat hamitim. So also the darkness of the golus has to be on the universal level, right? The death is, every individual dies, and so there's tchiyat hametim on an individual level, but on the universal or on the national level, there's a golus, and that golus has to become to an end. So it has, and something which is built into the system of the Torah has to be mefurish into the system of the world, has to be mefurish in the Torah, because the Torah reflects the reality of this world, or this world reflects the reality of the Torah, and therefore there has to be a correspondence between the Torah and the world. So the Torah, if the ketz is inherent, right, in the world, that there must be a ketz, so too the ketz is inherent in the Torah itself. So it has to be in the Torah. That's why it has to be there. Aval hu eino yachol liot galui. But it can't be totally revealed. Okay, so there's that's what we learned. That on the one hand, it has to be in the Torah because it's part of the world. On the other hand, it can't be galui because it's coming from it feeds from and it derives from a higher source. V'amnam hayu kitzim, or on page Kuf Tet Vav, if you want to join us, okay? If you have a book. V'amnam hayu kitzim shehayu yoter megulim, ki ein, right, hadalad meos shona, right, on page Kuf Tet Vav, for those of you joining us a few minutes late, ki ein hadalad meos shona shel Mitzrayim, v'ha'ayin v'shivim shona shel galut Bavel. Those were kitzim that were a little bit more galui. Ketz acharon, kivan shua yoter elyon v'yoter pnimi. It's the highest and the most pnimi, right? The most hidden and right, what essential, the essence of it goes to the essence of the creation of the world. And therefore, it's not galui at all. Right? And so he says, and then this is a very key section, key paragraph. Kol ketz mechayev emuna. והאמת שגם בקיצים של מצרים ובבל היו חשבונות וטעויות. There was mistakes when does the 400 years end, right? And people left early, right? And Bavel, there was cheshbonot, and nobody knew exactly when you start calculating the 70 years. ודין על עצמו חישרי ותא בעין שנה של גלות בבל, כיסא בגמרא. ומשמע בראשונים, so now Moshe is telling us something, a chiddush, she'atamu. Why is it that it seems to be that the sugi of ketz is always shrouded in mistakes, right? And mystery and mistakes. There was never a ketz, right? Even the most straightforward such statements of 400 years of the Ger Yezracha Be'eretz Olam Rabbi Mesham, and the 70 years that were foretold to the Nevi'im of the Golus of Bavel, right? Even they, right, were subject to errors, right? ומשמע ראשונים שהטעם הוא שכל קץ צריך לבוא עם ניסיונות של אמונה וסמיכות דת על הקדוש ברוך הוא. The kates, right, in order for there to be a kates, it has to be something which will test our faith. There is a kates which doesn't test our faith. It is and as we'll see, it negates the concept of being in Golus. Right? Whereas if you know that you're going to be in Golus, exactly when it's going to end, so then you you look at the calendar and you say, Beseder, they got to suffer another, right? The guy is sentenced to 20 years in jail, right? He knows, right? Again, it says he's suffering and this and that, but at the end of the day, right, he knows he has a date on the calendar when he knows he's going to go free, right? Right? But that's not the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to be. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to be in a state of constantly having to refer back to Him and rely on Him and not rely on the calendar. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want us to have certainty, right, in the Gashmias world. Right? He wants us to be in the world of the Gashmias. He wants us to constantly be aware of the fact that we are completely dependent upon Him. And that, and so therefore, in matters of whatever, and all kinds of matters of bitachon, whether it's parnasa or health or other things that we have to have bitachon in, right? There's no guarantees of anything because the Baruch Hu says that, right, the minute that you start depending upon something specific, right, so then you're not with me anymore, right? So then you're not living in the world that I want you to live in. Right? I want you to live in a world which is connected to me. And so therefore, you always have to have some degree of uncertainty about the Gashmi world, right? And if we don't, we should be seeing that ourselves. We shouldn't need reminders. But sometimes, right, when we begin to think about certainty in this world, so then HaKadosh Baruch Hu reminds us, okay, you think you got it figured out, right? You think that that you have X dollars in the bank, so you're set for X amount of years, right? You'll be able to marry off your kids and your grandchildren, or whatever it is, or you think that whatever it is you think, right? That you think that the things are fixed. No, Kodesh Baruch Hu reminds us. So Kodesh Baruch Hu always wants us to be in a state of reliance, of smichut dat. That's what He wants. So in the case of the Geula, of the end of the Galut and the Kates, He wants us to constantly saying, listen, I have to turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu because I don't know what's going to happen. I can't predict it. Right? I got to come back and as we saw, and we'll see it again, that we're going to predict it and it's going to turn out to be not correct, which just means that I got to come back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and say, okay, I tried to figure things out. I tried to learn the psukim the best I could, and I came to certain conclusions. But I see that at the end of the day, I'm going to need you to really get me out of this mess because I can't figure out how it's going. I can't really figure out how it's going to end. L'chein. So as he says, kol kates. We repeat the sentence, very very important sentence. The kol kates tzarich lavo im nisyonot shel emunah v'smichut dat al Kadosh Baruch Hu. The kates has to come with tests of faith, right? And ultimately, my faith is being tested when Mashiach isn't coming yet, even though I have svaras to think that he should have come. But and I have to say, at the end of the day, I just rely on Kadosh Baruch Hu. Kadosh Baruch Hu, you're running the show, right? So I rely that it's going to happen. But I say, I turn over the keys to him. I can't be in control. I'm not in control of, and to be able to figure out the kates through the psukim and make a definite statement about it means, in a certain sense, taking over control. Right? And that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want us to do. You can't look in the calendar and see when it's going to happen. Today, all of the calculations that were made over the centuries, right? Moshe is going to point out that we really don't have people who are involved so much today in doing it, right? The Gedolim, Moshe mentions the Malbim. The Malbim lived in the middle of the 19th century, and that's almost 200 years ago, right? And 50 years ago. So that's we don't have people there. But so all the kitzim are over. Zenikra nityashu min agula. So we've been mekayem, what the Chazal say, that the Ben David will come only when we give up hope. What does it mean we give up hope? Because we don't know. We thought we tried this is drasha, that perush, and nothing works. Ve'asur lanu lafsid et ha'amunah shel kates. But on the other hand, right? On the other hand, it's usher for us to lose the amunah that there will be a kates. There is a kates, not there will be. There is a kates built into the world. Dainu sheish gevul v'kates l'choshech, ela shezeh lo galui. Right, but we know that there will be a gevul and a kates l'choshech, but it's not revealed yet. Okay, that's the idea. Let's turn the page. V'zeu bir sheb'ma shekatav haRamban v'chemoto kol harishonim ha'achronim shesku b'zeh amlu b'bir ha'ktuvim. As we mentioned before, this is shekol ha'yisuk b'chishuvei ha'kates hu b'derech efsher. That's what it means when the Ramban says that we calculate the kates b'derech efsher, as a possibilities. Kiperush l'psukim v'sefer Daniel. She'ein ze stam derech safek kilo barur haperush. What he's saying is, it's not just a safek; it's a doubt that it's not that the perush isn't clear. But this is the proper way to learn it. The proper way to learn it is to say that I'm going to try to see what possibly could it mean. Right? Yeah. And because it could possibly be this, and there, it's written so cryptically and so with so many allusions to different events that happened in our history, and using them as jumping off points for further calculations. Right? As the Gemara points out already, that there were people who made calculations based on the length of the earlier Galios, and the Psukim will tell us how many times, how many, what percent, 150% of that or 500% of that or something like that. So all of these things, right? Limud b'derech efsher. Ki hanukuda pnimit shel haTorah nogat leketz. Right? That inner point of the Torah, which has relevance to the ketz, hanukuda shehi b'Torah vaday, or b'Torah vaday, right? That which is that point, which is Vare lo yichol galot kodem hageula. That can't be revealed before the. In other words, the ultimate. There was other possibilities, and as we keep on repeating, of course, it's possible that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will medaleg, right? They'll skip over things. The process will go quicker. And as we know, the Gemara says that we'll quote the Gemara later, in the next year, Be'ita achishena, there is a Geula Be'ita, and it's time, and there's a Geula of achishena, of speeding up. Right? So we know that there's always a possibility that the process will be speeded up. It doesn't mean that the case can't be earlier. It means that the case can't be later. It can't be later than there's a fixed time, which has to be, which there can't be later than that. But that fixed time, we can't know what it is. That's the Ketz HaPlaot, as Daniel calls it. The Ketz HaPlaot, we can't know when that is, and as we will see, right, the next year we'll see from another Gemara that the more that we get involved with the Ketz, right, the more that we think that we know when the Ketz is going to be, itself contradicts the state of being in Golus. Right? So there's a tension between, you've got to know the Golus is here, and we have to be in Golus, right? And we have to accept the fact that we're in Golus. Right? And we can't, and as we'll see in the next year, the Gemara Ksuba says, we can't rebel against the Golus even. Right? The Golus is part of something which we must undergo and experience, and to try to escape it is foolhardy, and it doesn't work, and it's against the will of Hashem, right? So we have to have the Golus. On the other hand, we have to have we know that there's a Ketz, right? And the knowing with finality when that Ketz is, right, is not consistent with being fully in Golus. So we have to have a Ketz which doesn't contradict the fact of our Golus, or doesn't affect our being in Golus. So that's the Ketz which can't be figured out, right? Which can be hinted at, which which we have a mitzvah to work at, right? And we say, right, there's a mitzvah to it's Divrei Torah, and there's a mitzvah to study those Divrei Torah, but it's a study of Divrei Torah which is not intended to lead us to the ultimate conclusions. Okay, Jory, a question?
Yeah, now I've got two questions.
Okay.
One question is, I've heard it said that if the Mashiach doesn't come by the year 6000, because it's been hurried along, then it will come then. So are we saying that that's wrong?
So I don't know. We're going to get into that. Right? We're going to get into that. There's a whole section in the next after we talk about the Ketz. So I don't know the answer to your question. So I'm going to pass on that question. How the year 6000 fits into it. I don't know.
Okay, and then the second question is, you're talking about escaping Galut and that being bad. Are we talking about Zionism in that category?
So that's gonna come up in the next year, right?
Okay.
Rav Moshe is surprisingly not. He doesn't take the Satmar position. Okay, okay. He I'm sure, I'm quite certain that Moshe was not a Zionist, but he doesn't take the Satmar position that it was usher to return to Eretz Yisrael and things like that, right? He doesn't see that as being a violation of the oaths that Klal Yisrael did. We'll see that as kind of.
I mean, just that statement that you threw out, I don't know if that's a distillation of what Rav Moshe is saying, or if it's something.
No, that's a Gemara, right? I mean, the Gemara says, these are Gemaras. We'll see that in the next couple of pages. These are explicit Gemaras, before Gemaras that we're not allowed to rebel, and we're not allowed to come en masse to Eretz Yisrael to recover it. So those are Gemaras. Okay, so whether the question is whether the history of Am Yisrael since the beginning when there was a return to Eretz Yisrael, so starting in the 1880s and the end of the 19th century, whether that is a violation of what the Gemara says we shouldn't do, that's already the question, right? So that's where the Satmar position is staked out in an extreme way, and Moshe doesn't ascribe to that particular way. But again, so there's Gemaras to say what you can't do, and right, you can't rebel, and you can't. The question is whether what we do, what's been happening in our history is the rebellion, or is it not, or is it something that would be permitted? Okay, that's a separate question. And we'll see when we get to that. Okay, that should be in another page, a couple pages. Okay.
In defense of Satmar Rav, I do want to mention that he was against Medinat Israel, but not Eretz Israel. And I read a book, and it quotes that someone came to him telling that they planning on moving to Eretz Israel, and he said, anybody who wants to do that, I'll give them a loan, as long as they don't take money from the Zionists.
Okay, good. It's more complicated. Okay. After the Satmar Rav lived in Eretz Israel for a number of years, and he tried to live in Eretz Israel, right? But at the end of the day, it didn't. For some reason, he wasn't successful in his plans in Eretz Israel, so he moved to Williamsburg. But it's more complicated. Of course, there's a very large Satmar community in Eretz Israel. And they don't take money from the government. Okay, that's okay. Beseder. Let's move on. Okay. V'etzem hadavar mefurash b'pasuk, and this is the pasuk that we've been dealing with, right? Right. The pasuk at the end of Daniel, the last chapter. V'yata Daniel stom hadvarim v'chatom hasefer ad 8 kids. Right? You should cover them up, you should close them up, seal the book until the time of the Kates. Yeshota tu Rabbeim, may many people be involved with this, right? Discussing it, right? Thinking about the inyan of Kates. V'tirbeh hadat, and there should be a lot of dat. There will be a ribui of dat. So says Rashi, right? Rashi explains. I said pasuk yud. Yidbareru v'yitlabnu hacheshbonot ha'ela. Right? The pasuk says that these things will become clear. These cheshbonos will become not clear, but they will become discussed. We'll try to clarify them. V'yitzarfu b'hem rabim labim. Many people will try to clarify them again to understand them. The Hirshio Rishayim, and the pasuk says, and the Rishayim will become more wicked. Et hachashbonot le'achashvam, says Rashi, shelo kemishpat, they will figure it wrong. V'kishe yichlu, and when the time ends, yomru ein od geula, and that's the tremendous danger, right? So people who are doing it, right, not with a total emuna in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but they're doing it. Listen, it says in the Daniel that there's going to be a case. I'm going to figure it out, and if I figure it out and he doesn't come, so then the whole thing is not true, right? So those are the Rishoyim who are, and in the next page, Rabbi Moshe is going to also identify that with the Christians, right? The Christianity, who, right, say that the Jewish Mashiach is not going to come, right? Because the gates of Daniel has passed already, and he hasn't come. So those are the Rishoyim, right? V'hamaskilim yavinu ota bevo 8 kates. They'll understand it when the time of the 8 kates comes. They'll see, and they'll be justified. They will be vindicated, right? And when the kates come, so it all depends on whether you approach it like the Rishoyim, or do you approach it like the Maskilim? Right? Maskilim is here in the good sense, right? The people who understand well, right? Okay. And that's how, and that's what the pasuk says, that these are, but it says stom v'chatom, right? Umevur shezeh guf hanisayon shel haketz. As Rashi makes it very clear, this itself, gufa, is the test, right? V'kacha tzarich lichyot me'ikar adin, and this is how we must live. In other words, we're giving instructions how to live, how to relate to it. The mitzad echad yesh chiyuv lilmod et hadivrei Torah ela. We should be learning them. There's like all divrei Torah. Okay, af shehem nisharim t'stumim, even though they remain unclear. Mitzad sheni yesh chiyuv shel emunah lehaftachat malkeinu leketz hane'elam sheyavo. Okay, So therefore, right, we have to, right, on the one hand, not know, on the other hand, be absolutely clear that Kodesh Baruch Hu's promises will be satisfied, will be fulfilled, right? And so, and that's the test, and that's the test that we have to experience, right? And and anybody who's thought about it, feels the it's not so easy. I mean, maybe today's a little bit easier, but it's not so easy for people to relate to the fact that okay, things have been going on for we've been in Golos for thousands of years, a couple thousand years already since the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and probably who says that things are going to get any better, right? Who says and that's a hard emunah, okay, and we've been disappointed, and we've had false messiahs, and we've had and so, and I've heard some Orthodox people in moments when they were being more honest than usual, not necessarily the biggest Talmid Chachamim, but regular organized people. Do I really believe it that the Moshiach is going to come? Believe that? It's not. It's a hard one. So, and we have to recognize that it's a test, and we have, but to the contrary, we have to know that this is exactly what was foretold, and as it says in the Sefer in the Daniel, v'hamaskilim yavinu, right? We have to align ourselves with the maskilim and not with the Rishayim, right? And believe, right? And this is the test, and as we said before, that every case always has a built-in test to it. There's always an nisayon. There's always a challenge, right? Because by definition, right, a case which is too meguleh, right, is going to, right, take away from the experience of the Golos, right? So we have to. So we can't be too meguleh. There's going to be a challenge, right? And people, people in Bavel also, right? We know that in the times of Purim, right, the people, Achashverosh threw a party, right? When he went, according to his cheshbon, the 70 years were over, right? And he said, okay, 70 years are over, Baruch Hashem, right? I don't know if he said Baruch Hashem, but 70 years are over, and we can, have a party. No more redemption. All the prophecies were shown to be false, and there were people, right, in Shushan who went to his Suda, right? And they also participated because they also doubted whether there was really going to be a geula or not, right? And that was part of the sin of Shenenu Misudas Achashverosh. The sin of that they had enough from Sudas Achashverosh wasn't only that they went to a goyish party, which is bad enough, right? Even though it was blood kosher, but they went to a goyish party. Okay, that's bad enough. But they joined a party which celebrated, right, the fact that there was not going to be a geula, right? And they said, okay, probably, okay, we're here. Yeah? We will become Babylonian citizens, and we'll live here, and we'll maybe we'll try to keep Torah mitzvahs the best we can. But Kacha, this is the Golos, and this is where we are, and the case is something which we don't really necessarily believe is going to happen, and that's the nisayon. Today we face the nisayon today. Rabbi Yaakov Emden, writing a couple hundred years ago in the 18th century, right? He wrote against the phenomenon that was happening in his time of people building, the rich people building these big houses and mansions, right? Back in Germany in the 18th century, not only in Germany, but he lived in Germany, right? And he said, where's the belief in Mashiach? Why are people building, mansions which are going to stand for 100 years, 200 years? They're built with, the best materials and the best things, and with enough rooms that the guy can have all of his children, his grandchildren, and great grandchildren, all coming together for the Pesach Seder, and everybody's going to have place. I mean, why? Where is our belief in Mashiach? Yeah? And so we have to recognize that this is a challenge, and we have to place ourselves, repeat to ourselves every day. Ani mami b'emunah shlei b'vias HaMashiach. Afal pi she'yis mamea. Okay, that's weiter. Okay. Hesech hadas v'yush min hagula. V'nira. So he says, Ketz ha'plaot mechayev hesech hadas. V'nira, shezeh yisod divrei Gemara shehagula ba behesech hadas. V'dafka achrei yayush min hagula. What does it mean that the Gula comes behesech hadas? Right? And when we're not paying attention, we're not looking for it, like a metzia. Right? Remember, that was the mashal, right? You find something, it's not part of the mahalach of what you do with your life. Right? So now Rav Moshe is hinting to another point, which he made, but we'll have to make explicit again, that the olam, right, there could generate the different elements that are happening in history, which could be causes or forerunners or leading into a case. Right? Different things that are happening that could be a case. Right? And we have to be able to see, and kolu kol ha-kitzim, right? It says that all of those kitzim which could emerge out of processes, historical processes, the way Am Yisrael is, the way the world is, and which could lead to the case, they're going to not pan out. They're going to be shown to be not capable of getting us to the case. Ad shekvar lo yishaer shum halach mitzad olam lachriach et hagula. Right, that mitzad ha'olam, there won't be anything which could bring about, could force the Geula. To lead to Geula, there's nothing going to be present in the world which can lead there. That's the time of Ketz HaPlaot. No, that's the ultimate end. Meaning, we're not saying that there are things can't lead to, things could lead to the Ketz. But there's going to come a time when there aren't going to be any more things that could lead to the Ketz. And then we're going to be in a situation where, right, we are in a complete dead end. They say in Hebrew, "Mavoy satum." Right? We can't move here, right? Just like the Jews in Kriyas Yamsuf, right? Right? The Egyptians were chasing from the back, and the sea was in front, and no place to go, right? Right? Total, right? Total impossibility. No place to go, right? And when it becomes total impossibility, right, that's the time of the Ketz HaPlaot, and that's the time, and that's the time that we can't know about, right? Right? זה הזמן המיוחד של קץ הפלאות, וזה מה שנקרא נתייאשו מן הגאולה. Right? When the Ketz HaPlaot comes, so then that's going to be נתייאשו מן הגאולה. We don't see it. We don't see it happening. Right? כלומר, כבר אין שום מהלך מצד העולם שתבוא הגאולה בבחינת תכלן הכל אלה. Right? Because the Pasuk says in Pasuk Zion, this is a few psukim later in the right, Mamish at the end of the Sefer in Daniel, right? He says, "Tichlana kol eila." Everything is going to be over. Kolu kol hakitzim. Everything is going to be over, right? So if we think that there is a mahalach in this world, right, to which is going to lead in a natural, organic way to the Ketz HaPlaot is not going to come out of something natural and organic, right? It's going to happen in a way which is going to be whatever processes we see are going to prove to be not the processes which are going to lead us to the Ketz HaPlaot. Not that perhaps that maybe there was a potential that they could have, but when they don't work out, we're going to be in a situation of kalu kol hakitzim. Right? There's a famous word from Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, right, which I like to quote, is that back in Parshas Vayeshev, right, in the birth of Peretz and Zerach, the children of Yehuda, right, when Tamar gave birth to twins, right, so Yehuda, so it says, so we know that Mashiach comes from Peretz, right? Okay, as we say, right, Mashiach, David HaMelech was a descendant of Peretz, right? Right, and we say in L'chododi, right? Al Yad Ish Ben Partzi, right? That's what it means, right? the Moshiach David HaMelech, and right, is a descendant from Yehuda through Peretz. So if you remember the story of the birth of Peretz and Zerach, so Zerach was going to come out first, and Peretz stuck his hand out, and he withdrew his hand, and then Zerach came out, and then and Peretz came out. Right? If I got it right, correct, right? Right. So he says, well, what's the point? He says is that maybe I got it backwards. The Peretz came out, right? So he says, Paratz the Peretz. He says there's going to be a Zerach. It's going to be like there's going to become a time when it'll be like the sun shines, right? There's going to be some kind of a like a dawn of sunshine that people will think, oh, this is the Geula, right? They'll understand that the sun's rising. There's a Geula happening, right? And then comes along, right? The Peretz is going to that's not going to be the Geula. The Geula is going to come from Paratz the Peretz. It's going to be a Peretz which is going to come from a different direction, something which we can't identify as being a process which is going together. It's going to come from a completely different point. Right? That's what he says. So the Paratz the Geula, the ultimate Geula is going to come in a way which is not a natural consequence or natural derivative of the natural processes which we see. That's what Moshe is saying. That's the pshat in Isyashim and Geula, and that's the pshat in Kol Kitzim. Question?
Well, it seemed like in many of our earlier shiurim, we were talking about how things are going to be so bad. We're going to get to the point where there's no Talmidei Chachamim, and things are going to. So, is that the same limud that we're having here? I mean, this.
Again, it certainly doesn't contradict it. It's saying is that the here he's talking again. Here, I'm sorry, somebody's knocking on my door. Here it's here it's something which is here he's talking from the point of view of Kates, right? How we're going to get, what the processes are getting there, right? Those were descriptions of how bad things are going to be, but there's no contradiction. I mean, the Kol Kitzim is going to be also in a time when we won't even see that we don't even have the zchuyot, right, to think that we could bring about Mashiach, right? Okay.
Bring about or calculate, huh?
Again, it's again here we're talking in this chapter we're talking about calculations. That we're talking about the sad state of Klal Yisrael, in general, right? But there's a correspondence. There's a correspondence between the sad state of Am Yisrael that we're going to be losing all of those things that the milas that we had and all the inyanim of malchus that we had, right? Those are going to be lost. And at the same time, we're going to be seeing that whatever calculations we have aren't working out. So we'll be, we're going to, from all sides, we're going to be hit, right? Okay, and so let's try to finish up. Okay, the Afal P. Okay, so now Rabbi Moshe is going to say, V'afal pi shadayin ein advarim b'rurim kol tzarcham, even though things are not yet clear, and this is anticipating the fact that Rabbi Moshe is going to spend another 2 chapters. Okay? Again, I don't know how much we're going to do, right? Maybe we'll get started on it. Another 2 chapters clarifying some of these issues. Okay, and he's not giving up, right? Moshe didn't want to walk away from the sugya, without clarifying to the best of his possible ability. But he says, as so far, things are not so clear. This is where Rabbi Zera was talking about when he said, Ki Rabbi Zera, with the Gemara that we learned at the beginning of the shir, when he found the Rabbanan who were involved in figuring out the Kates, he said, please, I'm requesting of you, lo terachakuha. Do not push it off. Do not make it more further away. Do not push it off into the distance. שכשם שלא ניתן להשיג את הקץ במהלכי העולם, just like we can't reach Kates through the processes of this world, hu hadin lehefech. So it turns out that's the opposite, in the other direction, not the opposite, but in the other direction. Bizman she'asukim legalot et haKates, if we're involved with figuring out the Kates, machnisim et zeh letoch mahalach ha'olam. So what you're doing is that you're collapsing the Kates into the mahalchim of this world. This is going to prevent the Mashiach from coming. Mashiach. The more we try to put the concepts, the Mashiach into some kind of fix, we try to some kind of fixture, right? We go so far as to call it some kind of a straitjacket, right? It's got to be some. It's got to come. We're trying to see how is he going to come out of this world. So the more we try to be mitzamtzem, and we look at it not as something which is coming from beyond this world, but so this is coming out of this world. So then it contradicts the essence of what Mashiach is, because as we learned in the previous week, that Mashiach, the whole concept of is a stepping stone, is a middle ground towards Olam Haba, which is beyond any thought and beyond any comprehension and beyond what we can figure out. So when we take something and we try to squeeze it into a box, so then we're really how should I damaging? We're neutering it. We're making it. We're taking away its dimension of transcendental and of transcendentalism, of going beyond nature or going beyond the history, and we're trying to push it into history. So if you try to push Mashiach into history, right, it's not going to work, right? And the more you try, you say, "Oh, we have it figured out." We have it figured out that we're going to have a history, and let's even talk about the present, the Zionism. Okay, we have it figured out. We're going to take over the land, and we're going to do it, and eventually we'll get rid of all the Arabs, and we'll purify the land, whatever it is, and we're going to bring them in Mashiach, and then we'll build a base on Mikdash, and we'll go on Har HaBayis and everything. We got it all figured out, right? Well, the more you think you have it all figured out, right, the more you're putting into this worldly terms, right? Yeah. Again, this is really the sin of nationalism, right? The sin of national. What is this? The original sin of nationalism is of Jewish nationalism is trying to put Am Yisrael into the same categories as the European nations in 1848 were trying to figure out, right, what a nation was. So you say, okay, if the Czechs can think of that, and the Poles can think of that, and the Ukrainians can think of that, and everybody defines what a nation is, right? And the nation is basically whatever it is, language and territory, whatever it is. So we'll define Am Yisrael as a nation among all the nations of the world. So we're mitzamtzem, this infinite, this ruchniistic concept called Am Yisrael, into a very gashmiistic framework of what it means to be a nation, and we're going to completely strip the nation of Am Yisrael from Torah and mitzvahs, right? And just identify it with language and territory and things like that. So Memela, that's going to make it impossible for Mashiach to come, because you're putting mitzamtzem, the concept of the Jewish people, into a framework which cannot touch, that has no makom maga, has no contact with the infinite. And once you have no contact with the infinite, so then there's not going to be a Mashiach. And it's only when you open yourself up to the infinite, which means you open yourself up to the spiritual aspects of Klal Yisrael. I mean, when you recognize that the essence of Klal Yisrael is a spiritual entity and not a physical entity, so then, okay, then you can then Klal Yisrael can reach a contact with the spiritual dimensions, right? So that's the That's what we're saying. So it can't come. So the more we think that we have a mahalach, that's what the Rav Yaakov Kamenetz was saying too. The more we think we have a zerach, right? That's a steer to the parrots, right? The zerach says, "Oh, I have a mahalach. The sun's shining, right?" Okay. That's a steer to the parrots. The parrots is that it's got to come from the frots, right? Not it doesn't come as the rising of the dawn. So you can argue with
AI, if I can interject. When the machines and everyone's going to do all of our work for us, we'll just sit back and sit in the Beit HaMidrash and study. Maybe that's the parrots.
Okay, maybe. Okay. Beseder. You know my opinion, Jory, so we're not gonna hash it out. I'm not gonna hash it out in public. Okay. Weiter. Okay, let's finish up here. Amoraim mefarshim b'derech vaday. Right. So he says v'yitachen. So he says a new twist here. She'akpeda. So Reb Zera. Why did again? He's coming back to try to reconcile. Reb Zera said, "Don't get involved with it, please, because you're going to you're pushing off Mashiach." And the Rishonim Achronim did it. So again, he's trying to say a teretz in a little bit of a different direction, right? Iskam or iskam hu be'esek haTorah shel peh. He only was talking about Chachmei HaGemara. There's a very, Ramesh is pointing out a yesodistic chiluk between the Chachmei HaGemara and the Rishonim and Achronim who came after the Gemara, about how we relate to Torah Shebal Peh B'Klal, how they related to Torah. Right? Ubekocham, in other words, the koach of the Amoraim, Reb Zera was an Amora, right? Ubekocham likboa v'legalot et pshat hapsukim b'derech vaday. Right? Somebody who was an Amora who lived in the period of the time when Chazal were still revealing the truths of the Torah Shebal Peh, right, through the truth of the Torah Shebechtav, through the Torah Shebal Peh. The az gilui haketz shelehem geder b'fnei atzmo. Whereas their gilui haketz was too definite. Hadomel b'chinat bikesh Yaakov lekalot et haketz. It was like Yaakov wanted to reveal the ketz. V'imhem hayu mefarshim et hapsukim haya zeh pshat amiti. If the Amoraim would do it, that would be a pshat amiti. That would be a true pshat. The chivin should remain unclear and uncovered. In other words, if an Amora would come along and say, "This is the case," so that would have been like something which was kavua. That's the pshat of the Torah. Right? If he said that's the pshat in Daniel, the pshat in Daniel is this. The case has got to come in this year, right? So that the koach of the Chachmei Torah Shebal Peh was so powerful in their interpretation of Torah that when they said this is pshat, it became the pshat, right? So therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, "Listen, this is what Reb Zera was saying. If you do this and you create the pshat, so then it'll be okay. And then what's HaKadosh Baruch Hu going to do if he doesn't want that to happen?" Right? So he says he's going to require a pu'ula mechudeshet me'HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'tchot et haketz hazeh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to have to come up and push it off, right? In other words, he said you created a case, okay, I'm going to have to push it off rather than just not reveal it. V'nimtza shehem merachakim et hagula mamash. Then we come out that they're pushing it off. Ma'ashein ken harishonim. But the Rishonim, right, the Ramban and the Rambam and all the others who are Rishonim and the Achronim, she'ein Toratam benuya al drasha psukim. They're not darshaning psukim. Okay? In other words, the Torah of the Rishonim, right, we very rarely, very, very rarely find that the Rishonim and Achronim base their Torah, on psukim. Right? Again, sometimes we have it, but that's not the way it works. So the system is that Chazal, right, darshan psukim, and the Rishonim darshan Gemara. Okay, that's right, the darshan Chazal. El albir hashmot shebetalmud. In other words, the Rishonim they don't get involved with darshaning psukim. Right, only what's the Talmud. Umashehem mefarshim psukim If they darshan when a later Rishon or Achron darshans a pasuk, it's not in order to be kovea the halacha. Right? In other words, even if somebody comes and says, "Oh, according to I can darshan a pasuk," but that's not going to be kovea the halacha. The halacha is mishtamea from Chazal and how they paskin and how they thought about things. Etzlam, so therefore, by the Rishonim, yoter efshari al limud hashayach lekesh shehu limud b'derech efshar. They could do the limud derech efshar, but the Amoraim, their learning was so powerful, right, and so much shaped the Torah Shebechtav that what they said, that's the way it is, and so therefore so he's saying that possibly this is what Reb Zera was doing. Ubemet, let's just finish up. Ubemet haparsha shel hakitzin hi nisayon gadol b'shvil Klal Yisrael. As we said before, this is a great test for Klal Yisrael. V'chol hanatzrut, and all of Christianity, b'nuya al hatanazu, is built on this taina shehem omrim sheveikolu kol hatkitzim. They're all over. Muchach shekadosh baruch hu ma'as b'Klal Yisrael, and it must be that Klal Yisrael, Baruch Hu, despises us. Right? V'Mashiach chvar lo yavo, and there won't be a Mashiach anymore. Hashem Yishmereinu, may God protect us from this. V'Rishonim savlu me'od me'avikuchim she'elim notzrim al zeh. And the Rishonim, the Ramban and others, but the Ramban was the most famous, but there's many others who had suffered, and they had to go through these debates, or whatever they were called, right? Yeah, there's a special name for them, right? But these debates with the guy, right? And they had to be involved because they had to show that the falseness of the Christian interpretation of the psukim. Vayom, says Ramosha in a typical Ramosha sentence, Vayom anu lo shavim harbe. Today we're not worth very much. Okay, so you should know that if Ramosha said he wasn't worth very much, so you can figure out what we're worth. But coming, right? I mean, he's considered that Ramosha was nu kol Torah kula, right? But we don't know very much, right? Ubegidrei shivrei kelim, and we are in the getter of broken vessels. Aval, right? So therefore, so don't pay attention to us. Aval sheklal Yisrael yadayin klal Yisrael, but when Klal Yisrael was still Klal Yisrael, hayu nisyonot chazakim sviv. There were very, very big nisyonot around the Zmanei HaKetz. V'tzichim lishaer chazak, and they had to be very strong. B'emunatam kasher ra'u ech she'ovrim kol hakitzim b'lo nigalim. They saw all the kitzim are passing and they're not redeemed. But at the end of the day, it's also to remember, to forget, right? Because Baruch Hu the Mashiach can come anytime. Gam shelo be'ito, right? Right? That even there's a ketz, but things can happen quickly. And tomorrow, if we all wake up and find that Moshiach is here, right? As I said once before in this year, right? About the Yerushalmi lady of 150 years ago who had one good dress, and when she came back from a wedding late at night, she ironed it before she went to sleep because Moshiach might come in the morning, and I won't have a clean dress to wear, right? So that's a great Moshiach. So the Chavetz Chaim had a special suit to greet Mashiach. So I'm not holding by that. You guys are not holding by that. But at the end of the day, that's what Klal Yisrael is. Klal Yisrael stands and say Chakalo b'chol yom shiavo, and that may Baruch Hu send Mashiach Sidkeinu b'meira b'meinu meit. Okay, we'll stop here, and the Mitzvah Hashem next week we'll continue with the going into the next year. Bezrat Hashem. Okay.
Thank you, Rav. Thank you.
Thank you, Rav.
Okay, my pleasure. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Call to